Hello, welcome everyone to the first video in the Curling Endgame series. You may remember last season, some of you enjoyed the Curling opening book series that I did. That was inspired by my chess background. We have opening books in chess that teach us the common moves, the common patterns you'll see early in a game, and what that means for the remainder of the game after that. What kind of patterns are set up, what kind of strategies and tactics are common in those situations. Well, the same thing goes for endgames. In chess, we study common patterns that we see when there are very few pieces on the board at the end of a game. And that means when we get to those situations, we can play them with more confidence. And I want to do the same thing here for curling. And in curling, when we're talking about endgames, I'm really going to be talking about the final end. What situations you'll find yourself in heading into the last end of a game, or potentially an extra end. As we get started, I want to start today with the most basic situation, which will be that we are tied with hammer heading into the extra end. I will also do a follow-up video on what to do when you are tied without hammer heading into the final end. Now, why am I picking this one first? This one's good because it covers both your extra end situations and your final end, 8th end, 10th end, last end of a timed game in a bonspiel or a league, where you know you're either going to win or lose the game here. A tie is unlikely to be an option. It's not impossible that you blank with the hammer, but for the most part, we're looking very simply at if we score one, we win the game. If we give up one, we lose the game. And the key thing to remember in these situations is nothing else really matters scoring-wise. We are looking to either score or not score. The number is irrelevant. And that's important as we head into this situation. So let's start looking at how we want to approach this end, tied in the final end, when we have the hammer. So first we have to think about what the team without the hammer is going to do. And we know that the other team is going to try to put up a guard. We're not going to worry for the sake of this video exactly where that guard is. I'll go into that a bit more when we talk about how to play this without the hammer. But the first thing I want to do is go through the situations that arise when the non-hammer team fails to make this shot. So first, let's say they throw it right through. No rock in play. It's your first rock. Really only two options. One, and I think this is most common at most levels of play, you're going to throw a rock into the corner of the house. Ideally, we want it somewhere around T-line, maybe actually veering a bit deep. You may be wondering, why would we want a rock behind the T-line? They can just freeze on it. The reason, of course, is that we don't really care about this freeze. If the non-hammer team ever throws that freeze, we still have tons of room to play with. It means they're not playing a guard. They're not bringing it to the middle. We're happy. Remember, our goal is to score one. We don't care when we get that one. We just want as much room as possible to score. So anything that takes the play out to the wings is great for us. So why do we want the rock deep then? Well, honestly, anywhere on the corner is going to be pretty good for you. But if you go above the tee line, if you say leave the rock here, there is a later game situation where, of course, the non-hammer team can hit and roll right to the top of the forefoot. You'd rather avoid that. If the middle stays open, it doesn't matter. But if they get a guard up later, of course, we'd rather have the rock back here. So I suppose the other question is, why do we want that rock in play at all? Well, a lot of times I like to call this rock a saver rock. And I think it's important at lower levels of play, club levels of play in particular. The idea here is that, say that the rest of the end goes great for you, and all that the other team is able to do is throw one last rock in at the end of the end on their final rock. You can now hit it, roll out, and you still win the game because you have another rock in play. So definitely something to consider. The other option is just to throw through. There's no way to get in trouble this way. I don't even know if teams at the very highest level would throw through in this situation in a tie game. Probably helps to have something in the house just in case things go wrong. Just make sure that if you're going to put something in play, it is way out to the wings. It's not impacting either your draw to the button or giving the opponent something to hide behind or use in the middle of the sheet. Second option, a very simple one here. They throw in anywhere from biting all the way to the back of the house or off the center line. Anywhere. We'll put it here because that's probably the most useful shot they throw in. No matter where they throw it in, hit it. Remember, you're only looking to score one. We don't want to leave the opponent with anything to use anywhere in the house. Anything that could have us facing 2 or 3 at the end where, if we hit and roll, we could lose the game. Yeah, we're just going to hit that rock. And ideally, if they're leaving something on the center line here, we want to hit and roll away from the center. For that same reason, we are going to take play away from the middle, make sure there's nothing in the middle our opponents can use, and still have a rock that could be the winner at the end. This is most important if the non-hammer team is a little deep, by the way, on their first rock. Here you absolutely do not want to hit in nose. I could have put that a little deeper. These circles for the rocks are a little big. But even in this situation, if you make the hit on the nose, the problem is whether they freeze right away or later, they will probably freeze here. And while you're counting, it's only a very small tap later in the end for yellow to now be threatening a steal. They could also tap you slightly for the same effect, but they don't even have to. Even a dead freeze or something close to a dead freeze like up here is now a pretty strong play. It probably has to be closer than that, but you get the point. We either a dead freeze or a slight tap, very strong play, definitely threatens a steal later in the end. Finally, one situation to consider is what if they throw a corner guard? They're trying to throw a center guard. They get off online. They throw a corner guard instead. There's probably a temptation here, for a lot of newer skips especially, to try to draw in behind that, right? Get in behind that corner guard. That's what you do in almost every end. The problem is that's a play you use when you're trying to score 2 or more points, right? We get one under a guard, and now we can follow it up with another rock. There's our 2 points. We don't need 2 points here. We need 1. 1 and 8 are worth exactly the same amount to us right now in this end. And when we come around that guard, we're now moving play to something behind a guard. We are increasing the likelihood that the game is going to be played around that guard. We don't want that. We don't want that play around the guard. We want play to be open. We want play to be accessible for us. We don't want there to be complications. So instead, what we should do is look to draw to the other side of the ice. By doing this, we have a rock that at some point our opponents will have to deal with, but we're not giving them an opportunity to use that guard with a backer. Granted, they can still go around that guard. It's nice that it's not on the center line, so we can beat it. But if we let them go around the guard when there's a backer, especially say if we come deep and we end up like here, now this rock is going to be very difficult to get rid of. Our scoring area has decreased significantly, and we're just inviting more complications than we need. All that said, let's get to the main idea of what's usually going to happen in these situations, which is that the non-hammer team is going to throw up a center line guard or a guard very close to the center line. That is the best shot for them in this case, and that is the shot that puts the most pressure on us. And what we have to answer is, how do we want to respond to that pressure early on? There are 2 main techniques. One that was popular throughout most of curling's history, and one that is the dominant play in elite level play, highly competitive play over the last decade or so. So the traditional way of playing this is we will just draw around. The important thing here is that we really, really don't want to leave a center guard. We also don't want to be exactly here. If you see your rock going deep, it's a good idea to sweep it deeper and deeper. Because right here, this rock doesn't hurt that much. Right here, it hurts a ton because of the potential for a freeze where there's now a difficult rock to get rid of. But what our goal is to come right here. We get in first. We put the pressure on the non-hammer team to have to get rid of that while also stealing. And they're not going to want to hit right away because they need more rocks in play first. So we're going to try to win with that rock. We're going to try to win by playing to the center. The other option which you may know already because I said it is the option that is used frequently now by competitive teams, is to play this tick shot where we knock this away, roll ours out or close to out, and open up the center. A couple things about this shot. It's not as hard as you think it is. Not saying it's an easy shot, especially if you've never thrown it. Not as hard as you think it is. Good club curlers can make this shot more often than you would assume, and can make it at a percentage where it's probably worth going for, at least in these situations. I'm not saying it has to become like the standard play against the center guard the whole game for basically anyone who isn't a super high-level curler, but in these final end situations tied with the hammer, might be worth going for if you have a good, strong lead that you feel confident about. Why wouldn't you want to go for this? Well, if you're assuming that most of the time you're either throwing through or removing this rock where it's going to get put back, then you're not really getting anything out of this shot. Draw around gets you something, and if you have a lead that you're pretty confident in their weight, and you know they'll usually get it somewhere up in front, doesn't have to be buried, by the way, either. It can be anywhere up in front. It's going to be a useful shot. Then, as long as it's at least, kind of tucked behind a little bit so that they can't hit and roll under their own rock on their next shot, then that's going to be more valuable than a missed tick shot. You also don't want to throw the tick if you think you're getting this a lot, where you just barely bump it and now you have two guards. So you're going to want to throw that tick shot when you do throw it somewhere around T-line to backline weight. You can even go up to hack. Just remember, the more weight you go, the more likely you are to remove the yellow rock. It makes it a little harder to make it. Does make it a little safer. So if you have a new curler, you don't necessarily want to make them draw here, and you want to try the tick, backline to hack is pretty safe because if they miss it, it'll go. You can get the rock through the house, and if they make it, there's still a good chance that they just push this off to the corner, and you probably are not going to get the shot where you leave two guards in the center. One option, if you're not sure which of these to do, is to throw this draw, but play it as tight as possible. Give what you'd call minimum ice. That way, the error is likely to come in one of two ways. Either they're narrow and you get your tick anyway, or if they're wide and light, then you get a guard. If you get a guard, at least it's not on the center line. At least it's not staggered with this. At least you have an open rock you can use or remove later in the end. Okay, so beyond the first two rocks, we can't really talk specifics much anymore. A lot of things are going to come up in the end. There are going to be a lot of different situations that arise tactically based on the angles available, exactly where rocks are placed, and other factors like your comfort level as a skip, how much room for error you want on your last shot. However, we can talk more generally about the strategy of how these ends play out and what you're trying to do with the hammer. Let's say our first four rocks go pretty well for both sides. The non-hammer team gets their guards up. We bury one. We have another one in the house pretty solidly here. Maybe the non-hammer team gets one down to about here on their third rock. Nothing spectacular has happened, but pretty typical of what we might see in a final end situation if everyone makes their shots. There is a temptation here, I think, for a lot of people at the hammer to just start guarding for their lives, trying to win with this rock in the forefoot right now, and leaving things the way they are. But I want you to remember that when we do this, we are really hoping that we never make a mistake and that yellow never makes a great shot. So, for instance, if we start guarding for our lives, we throw this guard up here, and let's say there's a few peels, peel replacements, and eventually yellow is going to try to do something, and we end up with one rock that comes a little deep. Well, now all yellow has to do, unless now we're on skip rocks, for instance, yellow hits this rock, boom, kaboom, kaboom, and this goes maybe back here. And suddenly yellow is really threatening to steal. It's not that it's over yet. Yeah, we probably have two rocks left for our skip to make a similar shot back. But now you've put a steal into play late in the end that wasn't there before. And you have limited time to react to it, and you're going to have to make good shots to win the game and pressure shots to win the game. Instead, if we go back to the situation that we had at the start of the end here, so we come back earlier in the end, our goal here should be to keep the middle open. We want to make our shot at the end as easy as possible. And while we're in a good position here, we'd much rather make yellow hit than give them a covered forefoot where they're always one shot away from completely flipping the end and making us risk a steal. So that means, as much as it doesn't seem like an intuitive idea to everyone, you probably want to peel these rocks off. We're going to peel a guard. And now, what you're probably wondering, especially if you're a newer skip, is, well, what happens now if they just play this little tap and say remove this rock? Yeah, it doesn't look too good, but we peel again. And we have a lot going on here. One, this rock is probably, I'll spit this out a little bit just to make it more obvious. This rock is probably exposed to hits, meaning yellow has to keep guarding it. They will try to do that, of course. They will try to do this, at which point we'll have to peel. At this point, we're already into the vice rocks, and, it's getting a little scary. But we've set up a lot of ways for us to win here. At some point, maybe they miss the guard, and we just hit. At some point, they come deep. We can make a little double, and at the worst, if we play this double and we just nose it, we've now opened up a much larger scoring area for ourselves. We can, at some point, play this little bump up like we saw yellow do in an earlier example. We can play this yellow double also, by the way, if we want to. And if we don't make it, at least open up a draw path. But worst case scenario, we always have this draw to win the game at the end, right? So keeping the middle open is more important than keeping our stone guarded. Is that going to be true all the way to the last rock of the end? Maybe not. And if our position's really dominant, maybe we change it up. Here's another scenario that can play out where the yellow team has come up short 3 times. Probably meant to throw 2 guards. Third guard, probably not. And we've got our 2 rocks on the forefoot or the top of the button. In high-level play, you would still be peeling these yellow guards. And by the way, that's still not a terrible idea here. You'll open it up. You'll have a shot at the end. You'll open up the forefoot. Even if they hit you, which they'll have to do at some point to beat you, you'll have an open hit or an easy draw for the win at the end of the game, if you can get rid of those yellow guards. However, in this case, I'm also not opposed, especially at club level, to just coming in again, getting a completely dominant position, making it, wherever you put it, make it so that yellow has no way in, is going to have to hit at some point, or make a bunch of difficult freeze, taps, removals before they have a chance to even beat you. When your position is this dominant at the club level, I think it's okay to play this way. Generally speaking, I prefer to open up the middle just because I want to make my skips rock as easy as possible. And we can look at that sort of backwards too. Let's think about the end of the end. What's the ideal house for us? Well, ideally we already have one in, you don't have to throw a rock, right? But outside of that, we want one of 2 houses. An empty house, right, where we just are drawing for free for the win, or an open house with 1 yellow rock, where we just hit and stick for the win. Those are both awesome, easy to win situations where it's very difficult for us to go wrong and lose as a skip. We can't always get that, but that's the goal. And that's why cleaning out the middle is so important. It's thinking long term. It's thinking at the end of the end, what do I want to see? Yeah, there are times where things get too congested and we're forced to play to the middle. But when you have the opportunity, it's better to try to get to a situation like this. For instance, yellow only gets 1 guard up. We sort of get one in. Yellow tries to go around and comes up a little short. We might as well already be hitting, right? Like we've talked about hitting. We hit and we roll out maybe. And then yellow comes around again. Maybe beats us, maybe doesn't. They maybe say they don't even, just to make the example better. Yeah, we're 1 right now, but we should just be peeling this guard. Just peel the guard off. It's very difficult for yellow to steal here. It just is. I mean, there's not much for them to play for. They'll keep throwing center guards. You'll keep peeling them. But other than that, they're going to have to play some sort of little tap. They might choose to hit your red at some point. At some point, if they throw a poor guard, like say they try to throw a guard, but it comes up the center line, you may just hit again, and now it makes it even tougher for them. They're going to have to play a hit here. There just aren't enough rocks in play. The basic lesson we can learn from all of these examples is just this, that the more rocks in play, the more danger there is for us as the hammer team here. The fewer rocks in play, the more likely we're going to get to one of our ideal scenarios, which again are either this empty house or a house with one yellow rock in it that we can hit and get rid of with no guards. Sometimes, though, things really don't go the way we want, and we may find ourselves in a position where we're already on second rocks, we've got basically nothing or nothing useful in play, and the non-hammer team has set up perfectly. So what do we do here? It's going to be a shocking answer, but again, at least for a while, the answer is to peel the guards. So let's pretend this is already our third rock. We peel off one guard. Boom, boom. Yellow throws another guard back up. We try to peel. And you can be trying to make double peels on all of these. Another rock down. We're already on vice rocks. And what are we accomplishing by doing this? You may look at this and say, Ed, we're getting nowhere. And in a sense you are, but what you are accomplishing is preventing yellow from getting a more dominant position. You're kind of waiting for a mistake now. Maybe they throw a guard too close that you can double them. Maybe they throw one that ends up off the center line. Maybe they throw a second one in, unintentionally. And now when you peel, you've actually opened things up. And now they're going to be forced to throw perfect guards over and over again to beat you. How long can we do this for? Well, let's say we're on the second vice's rock. You're probably peeling one more time. But usually when we get to the skip rocks here, if yellow throws another guard, now we have to try something. There's a couple different somethings we can try, right? We can try this little tap. We can try just getting down to this, knowing that we have a play on it. We can now, it's easier to tap a second time. Like on our last rock, we can just hit the outside and push the yellow away to win. Or we can even play this double. Get these rocks moving. Even if you play this double, and even if you leave them sitting 2, because you didn't hit it hard enough, you're in way better position, right? Because now the key thing is, again, that scoring area has opened up where there's a lot of room for you to score. The key to these ends, especially when we're only talking about both teams needing to score 1, is that the hammer team wants to open up the scoring area. The non-hammer team wants to shrink it. One last idea on that note. You may often end up in a situation like this, where the non-hammer team has a rock in the house that's partially available to you, and a center line guard. Hitting either one is okay, but my preference, even at club level, is to play here and peel this rock off. Why do we do that? Well, 2 reasons. One, this rock, while good, is not on the button, so we have some room. And 2, we want to make them throw the guard back and make that guard perfectly over and over again, or close to perfectly. They ever leave a guard to the outside, we're absolutely going to hit this. They throw this back again, we can always hit the guard again. And of course we can come from this side, knowing that if we're a little wide, we do get this as well. The problem with hitting this first is that if we hit this, roll away a little, they now have a chance to draw under and be in actually a stronger position than they were before. Meanwhile, if we remove the guard, they can put a guard back, but either they're going to leave us in the same position where late in the end, perhaps on our first skip rock or our last vice rock, we can finally hit this and, be playing a pretty simple end. Or if they ever choose to guard this entirely, they open up the center line to us, and we at least have a chance, even if everything else goes wrong for us. So That's the preference. Just something to keep in mind. In this case, it's pretty close because I put the rocks close to the center line, but I've seen situations where, it looks like this, and teams will go after this rock even when it's the free guard zone's rule is over, and you can go after the center line guard. In this case, this center line guard is the dangerous rock. The rock out here is not going to beat you. I mean, unless you can't draw the 8 foot, in which case, hey, you lost the game because you didn't make your shot. That's fine. Or you don't make an open hit. Again, you can live with that. That's fine. But this rock can beat you, because if you get rid of this one and they draw under, now you're actually in trouble. If you get rid of this one and they choose to guard this, you still have all of this area in which to win the game. So I hope that helps a bit. I know this is a bit of a rambly video, a bit of a talky video, not structured as much as some others. But the key takeaways are just that we want to keep the scoring area, as large as possible and the sheet as open as possible when we're tied with the hammer in the final end. We don't want our opponents to have resources they can use to potentially beat us. Anything can be a resource, guards especially, but even rocks that are close to the 4 foot, in the 4 foot, especially behind the tee line, are going to be problematic for us, because it's just going to shut down and clamp down on the area in which we can score with our final rock. And as the skip on your final rock, you want as much room for error as possible. You either want an open hit, or you want to draw to an area that's as large as is available to you. A lot of people say, you're the skip, you should be able to hit the 4 foot. And to a certain extent, that's true. That's what you want to be able to do. You should certainly be willing to throw a rock to the 4 foot to win the game. But if you can make that area bigger, of course that's what you want. So be worried about stuff in the middle of the sheet. Don't worry about things out on the sides of the sheet. And keep cleaning out that center until you get to skip rocks. You're probably going to be okay. Thanks again for watching Chess on Ice. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell for notifications like they always tell you to do. Like the video if you liked it. Feel free to leave a comment if you have any additional ideas that you'd like to express about, playing the final end tied with hammer. And check out the Patreon if you're interested in supporting the channel more. You can find a link to that below in the description for this video. Thanks again, and as always, good curling.